This is Circe Olson Woessner. I'm the director of the Museum of the American Military Family in Tijeras, New Mexico, and this is our podcast, At Ease. I'm speaking with Diane Page Harper. She's a collage artist, she's a brat, she's a social worker, and she contributes to the museum's anthologies and social media. She wears a lot of hats. So, hi, Diane.
Hi, Circe. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
I need to tell our listeners that we're talking via phone because of the pandemic, and so we can't be in the room together. Otherwise, we would have done this interview in person when you were scheduled to come here in March to do some workshops. So we're just making do with the phone. So why don't you tell your listeners a little bit about your background? So I think you are an Army brat, right?
Yes. So I was born in 1962, so that kind of gives you an idea of what years we were in the military. My father was career Army, but he started off as a Marine embassy guard, but then got married to my mother in Luxembourg, where he was guarding the embassy, and decided when they moved back to the States that he was going to go into the Army instead. So that's how we ended up in the Army. And he retired in 1979.
Wow. Yeah, so definitely career. So I thought your mother was French.
She is. They were living in Luxembourg. My mother was a child of World War II in Strasbourg, France. And after the war, her family moved to Luxembourg, and that's where my father met her. They lived across the street from one another. My dad lived with the GIs, and they would have parties every payday.
Right.
And, women and music and probably a bit of alcohol and just a great party every payday. And my uncle, my mother's brother, kind of got involved with that circle of friends because they were musicians. So my mother kind of met my father through her brother. So it was kind of an interesting story.
Was it love at first sight, or?
No, she couldn't stand him. She said he was the skinny American with big feet. And he said hello to her, and she said, well, and she just snubbed him. So he said, well, la-ti-da to you too, and went on his way. But he made it a point to get to know her, and they were engaged secretly after their, I guess, not very many dates at all. 3 weeks. Wow. And they were engaged. So
wow. Well,
wow. It was fast.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I hear sometimes when the wives are from the host nation and the soldiers marry them and take them back to the States, and the families always think that they're never going to see their loved ones again. So were her parents happy she married an American and joined the military, or?
I think they were. They really liked my dad. He was earnest, and I don't know, they really, really liked him, and they continued to like him all throughout their lives. But my father's family had more difficult time because back then, when a Catholic and a Protestant got married, apparently it was a deal. I don't know. They considered that kind of a mixed marriage, and there was some newspaper article that my grandmother sent my dad to consider, and it was very weird when I heard that story.
I was going to say, that didn't go over well probably either.
Not with my mom, who was cradle Catholic, and my dad was Protestant, and they ended up not being able to get married in the Catholic Church, but got married by their Justice of the Peace and in a Protestant church. So, yeah. But my grandparents overseas really adored my dad.
Interesting. So they got married. My husband and I got married in Germany, and we had the civil wedding and the church wedding. They were separate. Yeah. So that is something that is different than in the States. So what other traditions and customs did your family blend in? Your mom being French, your dad being American. That's like third culture kids you were raised.
Yes.
So what kind of things did you guys do as a family?
Well, one thing that shows up in my collages actually is we would take Sunday trips, and Europeans would get dressed on a Sunday, whether they went to church or not. It wasn't like here in the States, but they would get dressed on Sundays it seemed back then, and go on these like day trips. And so we took many drives in our huge American station wagon on the Autobahn or, the highways in Luxembourg. And we would go on little trips. And so a lot of those trips are reflected in the photographs I have from that time period. So I get to see those again, and I'm all dressed up. We're all dressed up, and it's just very European. The other thing that was really that we took on was some of the Christmas traditions. We had quiche at Christmas, and we had Christmas at Christmas Eve. And we did, a lot of more European ornaments on the trees, and that sort of thing. And Easter was a big deal as well. The religious holidays were, a big deal for our family. Of course, my grandmother stopped cooking rabbit for Easter when we cried over the Easter bunny being, sacrificed to our meal on Sunday. So my grandmother did not understand that little nuance of culture, but she stopped making rabbit for Easter after the first time. That's all it took.
Your poor grandmother. Oh my gosh. Wow. So I was thinking, like in Germany, when kids start the first day of school on, I think it's first grade, they get a big cone of full of candy. In Europe, did they do anything to special for the kids' first day of school, or do you remember?
Not that I remember on the first day of school. Not that I remember, but I do remember when you mentioned getting candy. I remember on St. Nicholas Day, which was December 6th, we had to put out one shoe that was polished and ready for St. Nick to visit, and he either put coal and switches or candy in your shoe. So, that was something we celebrated. My grandfather's name was Nick, so we celebrated that both as his festival day and also as the, St. Nick arriving in Europe. But all the kids did that in Germany. We all had our shoes out, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. We took advantage of getting all the candy and toys.
Absolutely.
We had American Santa Claus and St. Nicholas and the Christkins.
Exactly.
And absolutely. Opportunists.
Yes.
So did you get more switches or more candy?
Candy. I was a goody two-shoes to my parents' face, but, I found my ways to get my way behind that. So, but no, I was a good kid. We were all good kids, We got candy. We got threatened all the time with switches, but never got them.
So
we were good.
So I know that you were able to visit your grandparents when you were living in Europe. Did your grandparents ever get to come to the States? Or did you make trips over even when you were living and stationed in the States? Did you go back to Luxembourg to visit, or was it difficult?
Well, my grandparents, while we were living overseas, we went there, I would think almost every month. While a lot of military families were visiting other countries like Poland or Czechoslovakia and places like that, we were visiting my grandparents along the Moselle River. We'd drive, and it was a lovely drive. But that's where we went on holiday. And in the summers, we spent a good deal of time there while my dad continued to work in Frankfurt. But when we moved to the States, my grandparents would fly here. They loved coming here. They loved it. My grandfather went to Wendy's with us and wanted to order a glass of wine, and wanted a fork and a knife with his burger. And he was told, no, we don't have that. So then he ordered a beer, and they was told they don't have that either. And he thought, what kind of place is this? But, some of that cultural stuff. But they loved coming to the States to visit. They loved it. So they made the trip over rather than the 5 of us going there until they were too old to travel. And my mother made the trip quarterly, I think, to visit them before they died. So, yeah.
So
that was where we spent our money, was trips for Mom back home.
So as a kid, and it may have been too subtle for you, but did you notice or appreciate the differences of lifestyle between your European grandparents and your U.S. grandparents? Just the differences in how they lived and how they... Yeah, so what were some of the appreciable things that you remember kind of recognizing?
Well, I didn't know my American grandparents very well at all, because I was a year old when we moved away after I was born. in California. And I didn't know them very well, but I got to know my European grandparents well because we were overseas for a total of 8 years of my childhood. And I got to know them very, very well. And they were extremely generous. My grandmother was known as Mabel the Miser. The American grandmother was Mabel the Miser, and she could pinch a penny till there wasn't anything left of it. I mean, she was not the same as my grandmother in Europe, and it wasn't quite fair to my American grandmother that I didn't know her in that way.
Right.
But we were separated from my American family more than we were my European family. I did get to know my dad's kid sister, who was 14 years younger than he was, because she did travel and visit us and live with us a little bit. But my French grandparents were so different, and we didn't speak the language to each other. So that made it even more interesting. We only knew the good sides of each other, which I think probably helped a lot in that kind of fairy tale grandparent relationship that I had with them.
Right.
We all had it.
Right. So you mentioned living in Frankfurt. Where else did you live as a brat? And then where did you finally end up settling?
Well, when my dad went to MP school and then became a CID agent with criminal investigations, there was only like 3 maybe labs in the world we could go to. It was in Japan, Fort Dix, New Jersey, Georgia, and Germany. So I guess that's 4. So there wasn't very many places we could go. So we were in Frankfurt for a good 4.5 years. We extended, and then we moved back to Georgia. But we had been at Georgia before going to Frankfurt and Fort Gordon, so we were there twice. When it came time to move again, my dad was faced with retiring or going to Japan, so he retired in 79 instead of going to Japan. And we moved here to Arkansas at that time because my dad's buddy from the crime lab, Ralph Turbyfield, who was in fingerprint division, had told then Governor Bill Clinton that he knew the best forensic photographer, and it was Harold Page, and he was retiring, and he needed to get him on board. So Bill Clinton officially hired my dad back in 79. So that's our Bill Clinton connection, who was then governor of this state, long before he became president.
So did you?
But that's how we got here, and my dad loved it. We didn't at first, but we grew to. And then I went to college here, and I met a guy and moved to Kansas, got married and moved to Kansas, then moved back here in 94 and was here ever since, except for 6 months I left to go to Utah, but came back because I had committed the cardinal sin for an Army brat, never stay in one place too long. And I'd been in Arkansas too long, and it became home, but I didn't know it was home until I left it.
Interesting.
That's how little I knew what home meant.
It's interesting. This kind of sounds like me. My husband got stationed in New Mexico, and I was here for 5 years, and then one day I just had to leave, and so I took a job in Massachusetts for a year, and then I came back to New Mexico, and I said, okay, I guess this is it. But I still every once in a while I get the Wanderlust and want to move somewhere else. Quick question.
Yeah.
So did you know Bill Clinton? I mean, did you get to hang?
No.
No. So it wasn't
my mother, no, I didn't know him. My mother served her at Dillard's when she was first lady. She would give her, she bought her clothes for her because my mom's this cute little French lady who was about a size 2. And with these blonde, this already gray hair and these piercing blue eyes with this thick accent, and people flocked to her to buy the clothes from her. So Dillard's was about the only game in town at the time, and we didn't have internet or anything like that, but Hillary bought clothing from my mother, and my mother knew her pretty, as well as you can as a customer to a salesperson. But that's our only. I don't even know if he knew my dad at all. I don't really know.
Oh, okay. Well, it just kind of, 6 degrees or 7 degrees of stuff.
It is. It's strange.
Yeah. So you have these different parallel careers. You know, you teach collage at college, and you work in a hospital. What are your jobs? What do you do? I mean, are you an art professor? And then
No, I was teaching at a state university about an hour from here. Drawing. I was teaching drawing, but the commute was too much for me. So I now teach at the Arkansas Art Center, which is a major museum here in town, for the whole state, actually. And I teach there, and I teach out of my studio, and I have a studio practice, and I work as a medical social worker at one of the local hospitals here. And it's a good balance. I need that balance for my art. I found out through this COVID thing that one suffers without the other. I don't know why that is.
Right. Well,
working on figuring that out.
We're finding lots of people are taking up art and baking and cooking and lots of cool things. Making something good out of something really truly awful. Speaking of those careers, then, so why did you choose? So, what was your major in college?
Well, in college, I really had a hard time figuring out what I wanted to do. I don't know if I'm that special in that area, but I really couldn't figure out what to do. But I wanted to work with people. I think I had this kind of service mentality that you get from being an Army brat.
Right.
I really do think that's a thing. And I wanted to be useful and helpful. And so I changed majors about 9 times, to be honest. Maybe 4 times on paper, but 9 times in my head.
Right.
And they were all things like foreign language, or wanted to do personnel management and work for an airline company, or I wanted to be a flight attendant or a nurse, wanted to be an interior designer. I chose not to be an artist. I don't know why, but I did. I chose not to be an artist. And then I fluctuated between the human sciences, like psychology and sociology. And I wound up with social work because it was kind of a combination of everything. Right. And that's what I've done. And it's pretty cool. Well, I did talk to some recruiters for the Navy at one point, and I did talk to Air Force recruiters at one point, but I never took the leap.
Well, I think you're in your right niche anyway. I mean, your artwork is beautiful, and
Thank you.
And your people skills makes me know that you're a good social worker too.
Thank you.
So, speaking of your artwork and your collages, I noticed that you add a lot of your personal photos and military symbolism to these collages. I mean, because it's your life.
Right.
And you just sent me one of your father. I'm assuming that was your father. Yeah. Why is it important for you to add so many aspects of your growing up years into your art, and especially if you're going to sell it?
Yeah, that's the burning question, isn't it? I think if selling it was my main objective, I probably shouldn't do that.
Right.
But selling is not necessarily my main objective with these pieces. I decided to kind of take on doing a posthumous collaboration with my father a while back, since I had all his photographs that he took. So most of the photographs, if not all of them, that are of me growing up and my brothers, my family, were taken by my dad. And so it's my way of being close to my family, my dad. I don't know. I have a pretty small family now.
Right.
And I've taken it on as my soul's work to kind of revisit those times and bring them to now. I also was a sick kid in the military, so I was in the military hospital system most of my life. And now what's emerging with this coronavirus stuff is some real parallels between fear and anxiety growing up in that system and fear and anxiety now. My last piece I did was before coronavirus, and it showed a surgeon with masks on and other medical people, and then coronavirus became so prevalent, and it was like, oh my God, it's the same stuff for me. So it just... I don't know, it's important to me to preserve what my dad captured.
Right.
And to get it out there. If he were alive today, I could see us working together. He had a minor in art when he went back to school on the GI Bill. It took him 17 years to get through school. But he did it. But he could only minor in art. He wanted to major in photography, but the crime lab wouldn't let him do that. So he minored in art. So we shared that. And I think that's why I feel close to him when I'm working on those pieces.
So if you do sell a piece, though, what kind of person tends to buy them? Is it another military, a person who's had military, or is it just anybody? Anybody.
The one that I sold, I sold one in last year's show that was my very first collage. I posted it on Facebook today, and it had my mother, and she looks like a Kennedy. You know, I mean, she just. Had my mother and the two kids, and a flag of Germany and Great Britain. And I really, I sold it to somebody who I don't think has that background. And she bought two other pieces at the same time, but she just loved the composition and the whatever story. I don't try to tell people what the story is so much unless they ask, but I let them put their own story because they're images that seem timeless to me, and they evoke a time in life in the 60s and 70s that looks different than life does today. Right. And I think that appeals to people too.
So there's the nostalgia. Yeah.
There is a nostalgia, but more of a longing, not necessarily for a better time and place, but for home, for a feeling of connection. Because I don't think it was such a better place back then, but I'm not bought into that. But I do feel like there's a longing for home. Right. That exists in a lot of us, even if we're not military.
Right.
Certainly for military kids.
Yeah. I'm surprised because the way your art is so exquisite that I would have thought you've been doing collages for a decade or so. You just started. So how did you learn that? Did you take a class or a workshop?
I did. I went to a workshop. I mean, I've always been interested in it and mixed media, and I dabbled in it, but I never really learned how to do it to this degree. And I went to a class in Dallas and with Maureen Browlette, and I'm forever grateful to her. And she just opened my eyes to a whole new way of using my dad's photographs. I had dabbled with printmaking and did a lot of lino cuts with his photographs, particularly portraits, but nothing opened up as much as this does, because my memories are nonlinear, and collage is certainly, it takes from everything and puts it all down. So I can grab old books, old photographs, old patterns and fabrics, and just mix it all up in colors. I just love it. It's a very good medium.
And so those ones that you post on Facebook and on the museum, you do some great museum Facebook posts, and we thank you for that. Are those collages done on wood then or on paper?
I fluctuate between paper and wood panel. Wood panel is great because you don't have to frame them. And when you do a lot of work on paper, you end up having tons of framing costs, which passes on to the customer or just comes straight out of your pocket and you're never reimbursed for it. So a lot of times I'll do wood as a practical application. I do love working on paper, though. I really love working on paper. So I go between the two. The bigger pieces, I have one that's 5 by 5 feet by 3 feet, and it's on 2 mat boards or illustration boards, I can't remember which, put together. So it's real flimsy. So now I have to get it mounted on a stretcher frame. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, so it's whatever I have and whatever I feel at the moment. I'm kind of an intuitive artist. I don't have a plan. So I have maybe a picture and I go from there.
Well, that's what's so nice about collage. I mean, you can add stuff that you find around your house. If you have like a broken necklace that you like, but you can't fix it anymore. I mean, I suppose you could... I don't know if you hot glue gun down it. How would you affix a piece of jewelry onto a collage?
With some thick medium.
Oh, so like
thick artist medium, gel medium.
Ah, okay. Well, see, so I think there's probably a lot of people sitting there in the pandemic with stuff, and they're looking to do stuff, and they've got their kids' art boards, and they've got some broken stuff, and they're thinking about, what can I do? Here's some old family photos. We don't know who these people are. We know that they're our family, but instead of putting them in a photo album where you don't know if this is great grandma Ethel or if this is, you could maybe cut up the picture and put it into a collage.
Yes, and I would, instead of cutting up the picture, I'd make a photocopy of it on your home printer, or scan it into your computer and then make a copy of it on your printer. So you can keep the original photograph and make the other one whatever size you want in black and white.
Good idea. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that way you don't lose the original source photo.
So you do collages, you do some drawings. Do you do other kinds of media too? My other favorite thing to do is painting in an abstract expressionist style. Think Willem de Kooning, or I don't know, there's a bunch, Franz Klein, people who back in the 50s in New York made really gestural action paintings. That's what I like. It's not necessarily Pollock, but that might be the underpainting. But to just make gorgeous compositions with thick paint. I love doing that too. I haven't done that in a while, but I use a lot of those techniques in my collage works when I make marks. So mark making is one thing I adore. So mark making, anything that makes a mark, I'm all over it. Those are like the blotches?
Yeah, I'll have stray marks, or I'll have things that look like maybe stray bullets, or I'll have writing, faux writing, and things like that on my works. And that all comes from my ability to do action painting, and that's kind of what I started off doing. But I'm not doing that so much anymore. Those are usually large works on canvas, which I think I'll get back to. But just not right now. Just not right now.
Well, so with a lot of people being kind of anxious at this time with the coronavirus and being, in the house, and it's a whole new normal. I mean, when you go and see people, you keep your distance. I would imagine that there's a lot of soothing that can go on doing art. A lot of, sort of calming. Because, you keep hearing that art is therapeutic. Do you think that that's true? Do you feel calmer when you're doing art?
Yes. I think art, like any meditative in-the-moment process, allows you to focus on what you're doing right here, right now, and not on what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow or what argument you just had with somebody. You kind of, without even knowing it, you slip into this zone that is so freeing, and then you've made something, whether you like it or not. You've made something, and I do think that it's real therapeutic, because a lot of times if you're just putting things down on paper, or on if you're gluing stuff down or something, things come out, and I don't know, maybe an energy or a feeling or something happens. And for me, I feel better afterwards, not worse. Always better. But it's a real meditative practice. And to me, it's as effective as closing my eyes and meditating in a fixed position for 15 minutes. It's just as effective, and it's just as here and now. It's like you have to focus on what you're doing right there, right now. So it's great. It's mindfulness. Yeah,
that's cool. That's really cool. I have a really hard time with sitting and meditating for 15 minutes, but I could probably color in a coloring book for 15 minutes and, be absorbed with that and maybe calm my mind. Yeah. So what else are you doing to keep busy during this pandemic? Cooking? Everybody seems to be baking now.
I'm not baking, I'm cooking. My husband and I decided to go vegetarian and sort of vegan, but not really, but we don't eat any animals anymore. So I'm having to learn how to cook differently. And so I've been cooking since January, and it's kind of stepped up a notch since this quarantine. And also, I'm doing a whole lot more reading and research, which I think is going to feed into my artwork, I'm hoping. And one thing I wanted to tell people to do if they're having a hard time being creative or just kind of getting that flow going, to get out an adult coloring book or order one online and order some cheap pens and just play with color schemes in an adult coloring book. And then when somebody says, oh, you're wasting time coloring, you say, no, I'm playing with color theory. I'm trying out different color schemes for my next painting. And you can get around, you can say that, and people will have to back off and go, oh, okay. So if you feel judged for coloring in a coloring book, just remember you can practice color theory.
Color theory. That's what I'm doing.
That's what I say anyway.
Yeah. Good tip there. Hey, so besides doing some collaborations with our museum, you've done some book covers, you're doing some projects with us, you're posting the gorgeous collages, you just did a second book cover for us. Are you doing any other collaborations with other groups? Any other art? Because your shows have been canceled for the year, right?
Well, I had the one show for sure canceled that was supposed to be mid-April. The one in September is still up in the air. I'm not really sure. Depends on if the university opens or not. And, but yeah, before this all hit, I was going to work on something with the local military history museum, so I still want to do that when it's safe to do that, but it might be put off for a year. Right. And then I'm working online with a friend of mine just as another creative person. We meet on Zoom about once a week or so and talk about, he's putting together a book, and I talk about what I'm thinking about these days and when I want to get back to the art making. And so I try to stay in touch with my artist friends that way right now. As far as active collaborations where we're side by side, we're not able to do that right now.
Right.
But I can see projects brewing for 2021, just not for 2020.
Yeah, I think all of 2020 is up in the air right now. We're hopeful. Yeah. We're hopeful, though. The museum had to pivot and go and do some things online and trying to be creative. And I find that I and a couple of other of my more artistic friends have been very creative during this time. Maybe just having to be in the house focuses us, but writing poetry and writing, my father, he's 90, he's writing his memoirs.
Wonderful.
Yeah, no, that is really, really good. Well, so do you have a website so people can follow you, or if they wanted to look at your art and buy art or something, is there some sort of online thing?
Yes, I would say on Instagram, it's at Diane Harper Art.
Diane Harper Art, okay.
And then if they want to follow me on Facebook, they can go to Diane Harper Fine Art, I think it is.
Diane Harper Fine Art.
Or Diane Page Harper.
Okay. And, okay, good. So I can, look for those links and put them up on
that'd be great.
Yeah, on the bottom of the podcast. Anything else that I haven't asked you? We need to start wrapping it up, but is there anything else you'd like your the listeners to know, or a favorite brat memory you have? Oh yeah, let's do a favorite brat memory. Put you on the spot.
I think a favorite brat memory was when we went to visit Berlin in 1976, and we were on one of those visiting towers overlooking the wall with armed guards walking back and forth, and my brother's tissue for cleaning the lens of his camera flew off into the east, and my dad said, we have to leave now, and we all rushed to get off of there because we didn't want to get in trouble from the Soviet guards, and my dad was in uniform, so we had to literally run out of there.
Wow. And that's just like such an innocent thing, but totally. Yeah, but wow. Well, that is cool. I mean, it stuck with you all these years, so it was a significant... Yeah. The things that we think of. Yeah, the things we think about, years later. Yeah, so listen, this has been really good. We've probably talked longer than 37 minutes we've talked. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I wanted to thank you, but I definitely think we've probably, gone too long. So once again, this has been Circe Woessner. I'm the director of the Museum of the I can't even say it anymore. The Museum of the American Military Family in Tijeras, New Mexico. And I've been speaking with Diane Page Harper, and this has been our podcast, At Ease. Now, somebody asked me what at ease means the other day, and I was thinking, and you and I had brainstormed this, well, at ease, what you do when you're on your downtime. So at ease, art and music and poetry, cooking. So any of the things that we're going to talk about with other people on a podcast, it's about at ease. So I wanted to thank you, Diane. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun. And I hope that you get out to New Mexico in the next year or so.
Thank you, Circe. I appreciate that so much. Be safe.
You too.